The hunters began their pursuit with meticulous precision, their strategy unfolding with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Using advanced technology, they unleashed surveillance drones that silently combed through the terrain, scanning every inch for movement. Their traps were designed to leave no room for error, blending seamlessly into the natural surroundings. They manipulated the environment to steer their prey, blocking potential escape routes and funneling her into areas where their ambushes would be most effective. Confident in their superior skills, the hunters operated with an arrogance that came from countless successful chases. To them, this was no different, a routine capture of yet another unfortunate target. She, however, was no ordinary quarry. The soldier moved with purpose, every step calculated to avoid detection. She understood the hunter's methods, identifying patterns in their traps and bypassing them with a level of precision that left her pursuers momentarily baffled. Her movements were deliberate yet swift, leveraging her military experience to outmaneuver the hunter's initial attempts to corner her. While they relied heavily on their technology, she trusted in her instincts, blending her training with a sharp awareness of her surroundings. She utilized the terrain to her advantage, slipping through narrow spaces and using natural cover to remain unseen. Each decision she made was a testament to her resourcefulness, as she stayed one step ahead, constantly adapting to the relentless pursuit. The tension in the chase mounted with every passing moment. The hunters, though methodical, began to sense the difficulty of capturing this particular prey. Their equipment detected traces of her presence, footprints in the soil, the faint heat signature of her passage, but every time they closed in, she was gone, leaving behind nothing but the faintest hint of her existence. Frustration crept into their ranks as their initial confidence began to waver. She was different from their usual prey. She was unpredictable, and unpredictability was something they hadn't accounted for. Her awareness of their tactics grew sharper with each passing hour. She recognized their reliance on predictable patterns and exploited it. When the hunters moved to block one escape route, she anticipated their actions and adjusted her own path accordingly. In a particularly narrow canyon, she discovered a series of traps meant to herd her into a bottleneck, where the hunters would surely strike. Instead of walking into the trap, she used the terrain to backtrack silently, evading capture and forcing her pursuers to regroup. But she wasn't invincible. The hunters' superior resources made their presence an ever-looming threat. Their weaponry, capable of disabling even the most sophisticated defenses, added a layer of danger to her every move. The sound of drones buzzing nearby was a constant reminder of their unrelenting pursuit. Yet, despite the odds stacked against her, she remained composed, her focus never wavering. Her survival wasn't a matter of chance, it was a matter of determination and skill. The hunters grew increasingly aggressive, ramping up their efforts as the chase continued. They altered their tactics, dividing into smaller units to cover more ground and tighten the net around her. They communicated seamlessly, their voices barely audible through encrypted channels. Every move they made was deliberate, designed to corner her. Yet, for all their efforts, she remained elusive, slipping through their grasp time and again. Close calls became more frequent. There were moments when she felt the hunter's presence mere feet away, the hairs on her neck standing on end as she held her breath to avoid detection. Their advanced scanners picked up faint traces of her movements, leading them closer with each passing second. Yet, just as they seemed poised to capture her, she would vanish, leaving them bewildered and forced to recalibrate their strategy. The hunters' frustration began to show. Their calculated precision gave way to small but critical mistakes. Miscommunications arose as they debated their next moves, their confidence faltering under the weight of repeated failures. The soldier observed these cracks in their unity, recognizing an opportunity to exploit their weaknesses. She wasn't just evading them, she was learning about them, studying their behavior and tactics. Every misstep they made gave her an edge, a deeper understanding of how to stay one step ahead. Her tactical mindset shifted subtly as she began to see the patterns in their movements. The hunters were predictable in their arrogance, their reliance on technology blinding them to the possibility of error. She began to anticipate their traps, sidestepping them with increasing ease. What had started as a desperate bid for survival was evolving into something more, a strategic battle of wits where she held the upper hand. Her ability to remain calm under pressure set her apart from her pursuers. While the hunters grew impatient and reckless, she maintained her composure, every action deliberate and precise. She was no longer merely reacting to their moves, she was thinking several steps ahead, forcing them to adapt to her rhythm. Each time they thought they had her cornered, she slipped away, leaving them with nothing but a trail of missed opportunities. As the chase stretched on, the dynamic between hunter and hunted began to blur. The hunters, once so sure of their superiority, found themselves struggling to maintain control. Meanwhile, the soldier's quiet determination grew stronger, her resolve unshaken despite the relentless pursuit. She had no intention of succumbing to their traps or falling victim to their arrogance. For the hunters, the chase was becoming a test of endurance, a battle against an adversary they had underestimated from the start. And for her, it was the beginning of a calculated plan to turn the tables entirely. The soldier's strategies shifted as she began to analyze the hunter's methods with meticulous precision. Every move they made revealed patterns in their behavior, weaknesses they didn't realize they were exposing. Their reliance on technology, though formidable, also made them predictable. She observed their tendency to depend on automated systems and pre-programmed strategies, which left little room for flexibility. Recognizing this flaw, she began to use it to her advantage. With calculated precision, she created subtle diversions, misleading tracks, false heat signatures, and decoys that sent the hunters scrambling in the wrong directions. Her first counterattack was swift and deliberate, not born out of desperation but as a calculated response to their growing arrogance. She exploited their overconfidence, targeting one of their advanced devices. By disabling a key drone, she disrupted their surveillance network, creating confusion among the group. They faltered, momentarily unsure of how to proceed. This act wasn't merely about survival, it was a message. The hunters, accustomed to instilling fear, were now experiencing it themselves, a fact they struggled to reconcile with their image of invincibility. The psychological shift was evident. The hunters were no longer operating as a cohesive unit. Tension began to simmer, subtle but telling. They started second-guessing their decisions, doubting whether their prey was as vulnerable as they had assumed. The soldier noticed this unraveling and used it to intensify her tactics. She turned the terrain into her ally, using its natural elements to create more elaborate traps. A snap branch here, a displaced rock there, small details that subtly misled the hunters while keeping them on edge. As she continued to maneuver through the terrain, her approach grew bolder. She began leaving deliberate signs of her presence, taunting them without fully revealing herself. This shift in strategy wasn't reckless but intentional. She was probing their reactions, studying how they adapted to her increasingly unpredictable moves. The hunters, though skilled, began to show cracks in their unity. The leader, once commanding and composed, started exhibiting signs of frustration. Orders became curt, and their movements less synchronized. They were still dangerous, but their focus was shifting from calculated precision to emotional responses, a weakness she was quick to exploit. She realized their fear was no longer just about losing a hunt, it was about losing control. These hunters thrived on dominance, their reputation built on never failing to capture their prey. Her ability to remain elusive and strike back was an affront to their entire identity. Every step she took was eroding their confidence, turning the tables in ways they hadn't anticipated. For the first time, they were on unfamiliar ground, and it showed. Her understanding of their technology deepened as she observed their devices and methods. She recognized patterns in how their equipment scanned the environment, their reliance on heat signatures and movement detection. With this knowledge, she began deploying countermeasures. By manipulating the temperature of her surroundings or creating false signals, she effectively blinded their sensors, forcing them to rely more on instinct, something they were far less adept at than she was. The psychological toll on the hunters became increasingly evident. Their frustration boiled over into visible cracks in their coordination. She noticed how they began making errors, small but significant ones. A delayed response here, a miscalculated step there. These mistakes compounded, amplifying their sense of vulnerability. The soldier's strategy wasn't just about physical survival, It was about breaking their spirits. She was dismantling their confidence piece by piece, forcing them to confront the possibility of failure, a reality they had never faced before. As the tension escalated, the hunters regrouped, trying to recalibrate their approach. They attempted to adapt by deploying more advanced tactics, splitting into smaller units to cover more ground and setting up ambushes that anticipated her movements. Yet, even in this, she stayed ahead. She recognized their intentions before they could fully execute them, countering with maneuvers that left them chasing shadows. Her ability to stay one step ahead wasn't just about skill. It was about understanding the fundamental flaws in their assumptions. The hunters had underestimated her from the beginning, seeing her as another target rather than an adversary. This miscalculation had cost them dearly. Now, as their desperation grew, their unity fractured further. The soldier capitalized on this, targeting their weakest links. She created situations that forced them into isolation, splitting their focus and making it easier to manipulate their actions. The more disjointed they became, the less effective their once formidable coordination was. Her calculated tactics began to erode their sense of superiority. The hunters were no longer moving with the same confidence that had defined them at the start. Each step they took was marked by hesitation, every decision colored by doubt. This shift was exactly what she had been working toward. She had turned the chase into a psychological battle, one where her strength lay not just in evasion but in dismantling the hunters from within. Their attempts to regroup and regain control became increasingly frantic. They tried to tighten their net, creating overlapping zones of surveillance and deploying more sophisticated traps. Yet, for all their efforts, they were reacting to her moves rather than dictating the course of the hunt. This reactive approach only deepened their frustration, as they found themselves consistently outmaneuvered. The soldier's ability to anticipate their actions gave her a distinct advantage, one she leveraged with precision. The dynamics of the chase had shifted entirely. The hunters, once so sure of their dominance, were now struggling to keep up. Their confidence had been replaced by a growing sense of unease, their tactics undermined at every turn. The soldier's calculated moves were no longer just about evasion, they were about control. She had seized the initiative, forcing the hunters to play by her rules. And in doing so, she had begun to lay the groundwork for her ultimate goal, turning the hunters into the hunted. The soldier transitioned from evasion to offense with calculated precision, turning her newfound understanding of the hunters into a decisive advantage. Each of their movements now worked against them as she set up subtle yet effective traps that exploited their over-reliance on technology. By targeting their communication systems and surveillance tools, she disrupted their ability to coordinate, creating pockets of confusion and isolation among the group. These actions weren't random. They were strategic dismantlings of their core strength, forcing the hunters into reactive and uncoordinated maneuvers. Her offensive tactics were both precise and unrelenting. She used the environment not just to hide but to create vulnerabilities in their approach. A calculated strike against their resources sent a clear message: she was no longer running. Each disruption left the hunters with fewer tools, eroding their confidence further. Their once flawless teamwork began to splinter as they adapted poorly to her new strategy. By leveraging her understanding of their technology, she turned their own tools against them, using their advanced systems to misdirect or disable key elements of their operations. The psychological impact of these countermeasures began to weigh heavily on the hunters. Their cohesion, once their greatest strength, started to unravel under the pressure of mounting failures. She targeted the weaker links in their team, isolating individual hunters and exploiting their vulnerabilities. This wasn't merely about thinning their ranks, it was about breaking their morale. As she eliminated members of their group, the fear of becoming the next target spread among the survivors. Their confidence in their own invincibility was shattered, replaced by uncertainty and paranoia. Every step the hunters took became a calculated risk. They moved more cautiously now, aware that every choice could lead to another trap. Their hesitation slowed their progress, giving her the upper hand. She had shifted the dynamics of the chase entirely. Where they once controlled the tempo, they now found themselves reacting to her movements, unable to predict where she would strike next. Her strategy wasn't just about eliminating them physically, It was about dismantling their control and reducing their capacity to act effectively. The hunters' frustration grew, manifesting in increasingly erratic decisions. Their attempts to regroup and launch a coordinated response were undermined by her constant interference. She used their desperation against them, forcing them to expend energy and resources on futile pursuits. The once meticulous hunters were now vulnerable, their every move dictated by her calculated strategy. This reversal of roles became increasingly apparent as the chase continued, with the hunters struggling to regain control and the soldier asserting her dominance with each passing moment. Her ability to exploit their fear and disunity reached a turning point. The hunters began making critical errors in judgment, their composure eroded by the relentless pressure she applied. They overextended themselves in an attempt to counter her, leaving gaps in their defenses that she capitalized on with surgical precision. Each mistake they made only deepened their predicament, reinforcing the notion that they were no longer the ones in control. Their carefully constructed hierarchy crumbled under the weight of their growing fear and frustration. Despite their advanced training and superior technology, the hunters were unprepared for an adversary who could adapt so effectively to their tactics. The soldier's ability to think several steps ahead gave her a decisive edge. She anticipated their maneuvers, predicting their responses with uncanny accuracy. Her ability to stay one step ahead forced them into a defensive posture, leaving them scrambling to keep up. Every time they tried to adjust their strategy, she was already there, countering their efforts before they could gain any momentum. The hunters' morale reached a breaking point as they began to realize the extent of their predicament. They were no longer hunting a victim, they were being systematically outsmarted and dismantled. The psychological toll of this realization was profound. Fear replaced confidence, and their once unshakable determination gave way to doubt. They were accustomed to being the apex predators, yet they now found themselves at the mercy of a single individual who had turned their own strengths into weaknesses. This shift in perception fundamentally changed the nature of their pursuit. Her focus remained unwavering as she continued to exploit their vulnerabilities. She avoided unnecessary risks, relying on precision and efficiency to achieve her goals. Each strike was deliberate, designed to maximize its impact while minimizing her exposure. She understood that the hunters, though disoriented, were still dangerous and that complacency could quickly undo her progress. Her discipline and strategic thinking were the keys to maintaining her advantage, ensuring that she remained in control of the situation. The hunters, now fully aware of the threat she posed, attempted one final, desperate maneuver to regain the upper hand. They consolidated their remaining forces, pooling their resources in a last-ditch effort to outmaneuver her. Yet, even in this, they were playing into her hands. She anticipated their actions and prepared accordingly, using their desperation against them. Their attempts to trap her only exposed them further, leaving them vulnerable to her calculated counterattacks. As the confrontation reached its climax, the hunters found themselves completely outmatched. Their confidence, resources, and cohesion had been systematically stripped away, leaving them vulnerable and exposed. The soldier had transformed from a target into a predator, one who had outwitted and outlasted her adversaries through sheer determination and strategic brilliance. She had turned their own tactics against them, proving that even the most formidable foes could be defeated with the right combination of skill, intelligence, and resilience. The aftermath of the confrontation revealed the culmination of her relentless strategy. Each calculated move she had made led to this moment, leaving behind a trail of dismantled forces and shattered confidence among the hunters. The victory was not simply one of survival, but a testament to her ability to adapt and overcome. Every choice had been deliberate, every action intentional, each step paving the way to a decisive outcome. The hunters, once revered as invincible, had been reduced to fragmented remnants, their arrogance undone by an adversary they had underestimated. As she surveyed the remnants of their effort, the implications of her actions began to surface. The hunters were not simply a rogue group but part of a larger system that thrived on dominance and control. Their sophisticated technology and structured tactics suggested an intricate network that extended far beyond the immediate pursuit. By breaking them, she had not only ensured her survival but also disrupted a critical part of their operations. The ripple effects of this defeat would undoubtedly reach further than the battlefield. Her attention turned to the information she had gathered during the hunt. The hunters' reliance on advanced systems became their undoing as she exploited their vulnerabilities to access valuable intelligence. Data she retrieved revealed detailed records of past operations, target profiles, and strategic insights. This information provided a window into the broader scope of their activities, exposing the scale of their influence and the far-reaching implications of their existence. The sheer extent of their reach painted a picture of a calculated organization built on fear and domination. This discovery presented a critical decision. She now possessed the means to disrupt their operations on a larger scale, but such a move carried significant risks. Exposing the hunters would undoubtedly attract attention from powerful entities that may not welcome such interference. Yet, the alternative, allowing their reign to continue unchecked, was equally unthinkable. The weight of this choice rested heavily on her, underscoring the broader stakes of her actions. Her victory was no longer just about survival, but about shaping the balance of power in a galaxy that had long suffered under the shadow of predators like them. As she processed the implications, a sense of clarity emerged. Her experience during the pursuit had reshaped her perspective, forcing her to confront her own capabilities and the responsibility they carried. The hunters had underestimated her not because of a lack of skill but because of their failure to recognize her resolve. This same resolve now guided her decision-making, driving her toward a course of action that aligned with her values. She was no longer just a survivor. She had become a force capable of influencing the very systems that sought to suppress her. The shift in dynamics had broader consequences for the hunters themselves. The loss of their reputation as infallible predators would send shockwaves through their ranks and the wider galaxy. Fear was their currency, and without it, their influence would wane. The ripple effects of this defeat would reach far beyond the immediate, undermining the foundation of their power. Other potential targets might find hope in the knowledge that even the most formidable enemies could be defeated, creating a spark of resistance that could grow into something larger. The intelligence she had uncovered hinted at a larger threat, one that extended beyond the immediate challenge of the hunters. Their operations were not isolated incidents but part of a systemic approach to maintaining control over the galaxy. This revelation introduced new complexities, suggesting that her journey was far from over. The hunters were merely one piece of a much larger puzzle, and the full scope of their influence remained to be uncovered. Yet, this realization did not deter her. It fueled her determination to continue the fight, knowing that her actions had the potential to make a lasting impact. Her next steps would require careful planning and strategic execution. The hunters, though weakened, were not entirely defeated, and their organization still posed a significant threat. Any misstep could bring new dangers, but the opportunity to challenge them on a larger scale was too important to ignore. The data she now possessed would serve as both a weapon and a shield, giving her an edge in navigating the challenges ahead. Her understanding of their systems and tactics provided a foundation for taking the fight to a level they would not expect. The significance of her transformation was not lost on her. She had started as a target, forced into a desperate struggle for survival, but through her actions, she had become a hunter in her own right. This shift was not born of vengeance but of necessity, a response to the realities of a world where strength and cunning were often the only means of survival. Her journey had reshaped her identity, forging her into someone capable of challenging the status quo and disrupting the systems of power that had long gone unchecked. The hunter's defeat served as a powerful message, a warning to those who relied on fear and oppression to maintain their dominance. Her actions demonstrated that even the most formidable adversaries could be undone by determination and ingenuity. This victory was not just a personal triumph, but a symbol of resistance against the forces that sought to control and suppress. The soldier had proven that courage and resilience could overcome even the most daunting challenges, offering a glimmer of hope in a galaxy that desperately needed it. As she prepared for the challenges ahead, her focus remained unshaken. The battle against the hunters had been a defining moment, but it was only the beginning. The knowledge she had gained and the strength she had discovered within herself would serve as the foundation for what came next. She understood that the road ahead would be fraught with danger, But she was ready to face it, armed with the lessons of her journey and the resolve to see her mission through. The galaxy had changed, though it didn't yet realize it. The hunters, once feared as the ultimate predators, had been humbled by a single individual who refused to bow to their dominance. This defeat marked the beginning of a shift in the balance of power, one that had the potential to reshape the future. The soldiers' actions had set a precedent, challenging the status quo and inspiring others to question the forces that sought to control them. The stage was set for a new kind of conflict, one where the hunted could rise against the hunters and reclaim their place in a galaxy that had long been defined by fear. The transformation she underwent became evident in her resolve and calculated approach to what lay ahead. The experience of being pursued, outnumbered, and underestimated had shaped her into a force that thrived in adversity. She no longer thought in terms of mere survival. Her mindset had shifted to strategy, dominance, and control. Her ability to learn, adapt, and capitalize on weaknesses had turned the pursuit into an opportunity to challenge the very systems that allowed such hunters to exist. What started as a fight for her life had evolved into a larger battle against oppression and exploitation. Her actions resonated far beyond the immediate defeat of her pursuers. By dismantling their strategies and exposing their vulnerabilities, she had laid bare the fragility of their perceived invincibility. This impact went beyond just the hunters themselves. It sent a ripple through the systems of power that relied on fear and subjugation. Those who had once cowered under the shadow of these predators might now find hope in the knowledge that resistance was possible. The cracks she created in their facade of dominance hinted at the potential for broader change. The intelligence she had secured was not just a tactical advantage, it was a tool for disruption. The data detailed their internal operations, alliances, and methodologies, exposing the network of control that sustained their activities. This information could be used to dismantle their influence systematically, targeting key nodes and dependencies that supported their operations. She recognized the significance of this knowledge and the leverage it provided. It was not just about striking back. It was about unraveling a system that thrived on fear and exploitation. Her next steps were guided by the lessons she had learned. The hunter's defeat demonstrated that even the most entrenched systems had weaknesses that could be exploited. She understood the importance of patience, precision, and timing, using the same principles that had allowed her to turn the tables during the chase. This approach extended to the larger battle she now faced, where each action had to be carefully calculated to maximize its impact and avoid unnecessary risks. The challenge ahead was daunting, but it was one she was prepared to face with the clarity and determination she had honed. The Hunters' organization would not take their defeat lightly. Their response would be swift and severe, an attempt to reassert control and salvage their reputation. This reality did not intimidate her. Instead, it strengthened her resolve. She anticipated their retaliation and began preparing for it, using the knowledge she had gained to stay several steps ahead. Her ability to think strategically and anticipate their moves was no longer a tool of survival but a weapon of resistance. She understood that their arrogance and over-reliance on fear could be turned against them, just as she had done before. Her actions also forced her to confront the ethical implications of her choices. The decisions she made during the chase were not without consequence, and she knew the path ahead would be fraught with difficult moral questions. The line between resistance and vengeance was thin, and she was determined to remain grounded in her principles. Her focus remained on dismantling systems of oppression rather than succumbing to the same cycles of violence and dominance that had defined her adversaries. This commitment to her values became a guiding force, ensuring that her actions aligned with the broader goal of creating a more just and balanced world. The psychological impact of her transformation was profound. She no longer saw herself as a victim or a survivor but as an active agent of change. Her experience had instilled in her a sense of agency and empowerment, a realization that she had the ability to influence outcomes rather than simply endure them. This shift in perspective gave her the confidence to face the challenges ahead with a sense of purpose and determination. She had become a symbol of resistance, not just to the hunters but to the systems they represented. The broader implications of her actions extended beyond her immediate situation. The Hunters' defeat disrupted the balance of power in ways that could not be ignored. Their loss would undoubtedly embolden others to challenge the status quo, sparking a ripple effect that could spread across the galaxy. Her victory was not just a singular event but a catalyst for change, inspiring those who had long been oppressed to rise against their oppressors. This potential for broader resistance added a layer of responsibility to her actions, as she understood the weight of the precedent she had set. As she planned her next moves, she remained acutely aware of the dangers that lay ahead. The Hunters' network was vast, and their influence extended far beyond the battlefield. The defeat of one group was only the beginning of a larger struggle, one that would require sustained effort and unwavering resolve. She prepared for this reality, understanding that the path forward would be fraught with challenges but also filled with opportunities to create meaningful change. Her focus remained on leveraging her strengths and the knowledge she had gained to disrupt the systems of power that sought to control and exploit. The legacy of her actions would not be defined by the immediate victory, but by the long-term impact they created. By challenging the Hunters and exposing their vulnerabilities, she had demonstrated that even the most entrenched systems were not invincible. This realization held the potential to reshape the dynamics of power in ways that extended far beyond her own story. Her actions were a reminder that courage and determination could overcome even the most formidable adversaries, offering hope to those who had long been silenced by fear. Her journey was far from over, but it was one she faced with a renewed sense of purpose. She had proven that resilience, strategy, and resolve were more powerful than any weapon or technology. The Hunters, once feared as the ultimate predators, had been brought down by their own arrogance and underestimation of a single individual's will to fight. Her story was a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the potential for change, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The fight ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to face it, knowing that her actions had already begun to shape the future.